Welcome to part two. Let's continue where we left off. So we had just finished setting up our GUI or our pane. So now we need to establish the connection, right? Create sockets and things like that. But then before we do that, remember that we need to, if I run this, we need to be able to get a list of, we need to be able to get a list of images, right? So which is that, so we need to read from a file. So let's do one thing at a time. Let's start logging in. The problem is the reason why I don't want to do log in now. Okay, it's fine. I guess I have no choice. So I'll start with logging in, because logging in requires us to connect to the server and use the the stream reader and the buffered reader and the print writer to communicate, because we'll be sending text. Remember, we said you use buffered read and print writer when you're communicating in text form or in terms of strings. So the user will send this command first. So the user will send this command and then followed by, without the anchor brackets, right? This greater than or less than symbols, without it. So it's going to be, for example, like this. Greetings, Buggy 456. So what I would do is I'll go here, go to my project. So Eclipse Workspace. What am I looking for again? Data. And then on the server side, because the details are stored on the server, right? So the server is going to read from the file and then check if the details that the user has sent match with the login details on the file. So I'll change this to from Buggy. I'll just come up with a random. I'll change it to just user, and the password is 123. You could leave it as Buggy 456. Really doesn't matter. Okay, let me just leave it as Buggy. So that's the file. I'll just leave it as Buggy. You can also add more details if you want. That's up to you. So in my case, let me check how it works. So the server should be able to validate the name. If the credentials are not valid, an error message must be returned. However, if it is successful, the server should allow the client to make other requests. So you should only allow if you're able to log in. So where do we write that code? We write it here inside our client pane. So remember, on both sides, I'm going to create what we call instance variables, right? Basically, the variables that are used when you create an instance or instantiate an object of this class. So what I would do is I'll make them private, because I don't want to call them from the other side. If I want to call them, then I'll just make them public or create an accessor, but then I don't think it's necessary. If you remember our notes, so if you remember our notes, so these are our notes, right? We talked about the different streams that I needed. All of these are needed on both sides. It depends on which side is doing what. So we need the stream reader and buffered reader and print writer on both sides. Input stream reader, I don't have to necessarily declare it. Remember, it's up to you how you do it. It's honestly up to you. I won't create a class variable for that, or an instance variable for that. I will create an instance variable for buffered reader and print writer, then the data input stream and data output stream, and then file input stream and file output stream and file input stream. Remember, also need the server, the socket class, or the server socket class, depending on where we are. So in my case, I'm inside the client, right? So this is information about the client. So I will have to create a socket, the client socket, because it's the client to try to connect via this client socket. And then private, since the client is the one, okay, before we do that, we also need buffered reader. And then I'll call it input, right? And then private print writer. I'll call it, yeah, output print write buffered reader will be called, I'll name it input. Buffered print writer will be named output. And then private, what's the next thing? So we need the file input stream or the file output stream. So in my case, right, I'm going to read the bytes from the file as the client, right? No, not. I'm not going to read. Let me think about it. Yeah, I'm actually going to use file output stream because I'm going to read the bytes from the server and then use file output stream to write those bytes to a new file that I'm going to create in my client folder. So on this client side, I'm going to use the file output stream, which I'm going to call file out, because the user is the one who's downloading the bytes or getting the bytes from the server. So we're going to need a file. Remember, file input output stream is to write bytes to the image. So I'm going to create an empty image, an empty file, call it whatever.jpg, then use file output stream to send out those bytes that I'm going to receive via the data input stream, because I'm going to read them in using data input stream. So since I'm going to read them in using data input stream, I need to declare data input stream and call it data in. And then is that all? So buffered read, print write, file output stream, data input stream. Yeah, that's all that we need this side. And then on the server side, remember we're going to have evol handler, which is going to take in a port number, obviously. So evol handler, it'll take in the port number where this server should run on. So I'm going to create an instance variable to store that port number. Instance variables. So private int port, and then this dot port is equals to port, and then I'm going to do Java documentation. So port is just the port number that the server runs on. That's where the server runs, right? And then I'm going to need to create my other instance variables. So remember, I'm on the server side, so I'm going to need to create a server socket, which would be my server, because this is a server. Come on. And then since I'm going to read in the bytes, since the file is stored on the server, I would have to read in the bytes from the server, right? So I have to read in the bytes from the file and then transmit them or send them to the client. So here I'm gonna need a file input stream because I'm gonna need to read the bytes from the file. So file in, and then send them using data output stream. So I'm gonna need, okay, I'm also gonna need buffered reader, because both sides are gonna communicate using text, right? So this will also, I'll call it also input here, and then my print writer, I'll also need it because they're gonna communicate back and forth in text via text too. So they use both forms of communication, text and binary. So that's why I also need data output stream, data out, to send out those bytes that I'm gonna read from the file input stream. So that's pretty much that, right? Those are all the variables that you need. What I would do is I'll instantiate them when this function is called. That's when I'm going to instantiate all of these. So if you remember the diagram that we have, that in order for in order for us to communicate with our server, we need to try to connect to the server, and then the server needs to say, hey, I accept the connection. So the server needs to accept. So how do we how do we instantiate the, so remember we're going to need to, I'm going to need to create a variable called connect, right? Okay. So I'm going to need a variable, no, not variable. Let me see. I need to go to my button for connecting, or the logging in button. So when the user logs in, right? How will the user log in? This will just send that message, which is, what is this? Yeah, this message is just going to say greetings, followed by the name that the user is entered on the text field, followed by the password that the user has entered. We're going to send that command to the server. Then the server will give us a response. Then we'll display the response in the text area for code server response. So that's fine. So now, since I'm going to use, it becomes very tricky because order matters. Since I'm going to use this text area, server response in all of my buttons, what I'll do is I'll do this. I'll actually instantiate it at the top before all those buttons, right? Because I'm gonna need to use it in all of my buttons. So maybe somewhere here, it doesn't matter where you have to declare it, just that the order. Because if I don't declare it before using it, remember everything's read from top to bottom. By the time it gets to login button, it'll be like server response does not exist because you've declared it down after the button. So that's why I had to put it at the top. Then now this is where I'm going to try to connect to log in to my server, right? How do I log in? So I'm going to remember in informatics, right? Each button you could double click it and then write the code that should be executed when the button is clicked, right? Or if you didn't do it from informatics, that's also fine. What I'm going to write here is I'm going to do what I call event handling. So to handle the event when the user has clicked the button. So to do that, I'm gonna need to say dot is it set on action, right? Set on action to say when this button is clicked, and then it takes an event handler. So I will just use lambdas for that. I'll just call it event and then put an arrow and then curly braces, and then anything within the curly braces is code that will be executed when this button is clicked on action, when the user takes an action, basically when they click the button. You could also change the color when the button is clicked so that you see the effect. You could do that. That's up to you. You could do that. So me, what I'm going to do is, let me see. Let me run it. I think is you have to use very proper. You have to use proper colors if you want it to, like, what do I? So what I mean is that when they click here, it doesn't really like show any effect, right? What we could do, right? Okay, yeah. I could set the border color. You see the border color, meaning around the edges of the button, to change to a different color when you hover the button, when you basically when you go over the button like this, or when the button is clicked. I can do that. So let me try. Let me see if I can remember how to do that. So you say btn login. So within that code, when the button is clicked, so I'm going to say dot set style. I think it's fx border color. I think it's fx border color if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So the border color that I'll set it to blue, right? When the button is clicked. And then let's run, and I think that's it. That's how you, yeah, you see the border color should be set to blue, but then you see it loses that color. So I would also have to do this, which is really annoying. I also have to copy this again to set the background color so that it doesn't lose the background color. And then I'm going to run and then click. You see, it's going to have that border color thingy. And then once you let go, there's many ways you can go about doing it. But then since that's going to add the extra necessary code, I'll just leave it. When the button is clicked, there's something should happen. The user will, because we have a text area for the server response. If you remember, this is the server response. So when you click here, it should output text here. Maybe failed to connect, something like that, or incorrect details, something like that. So let's try doing that. Also, when you're connecting, so when we're connecting, right, when we're logging in, when we log in, right, what I need to do first things first, I need to create the socket. I need to set up all the sockets and everything, right? All this buffered input stream and the data input streams, I need to set them up. They need to be ready, except for the file output stream, because I'm not reading from the file. I'm not outputting to the file rate yet. So the file output stream will be used a bit later, will be instantiated or created a bit later. So now what I need to do is the way it works, right? Remember, we have sockets on both sides. So I need to say socket, that socket, right? My socket object, to say create a new socket and then connect to what? It takes, there's a default one with the default constructor. Then there's the one whereby it takes in two parameters, the host, which is the local host, and which port number this server will be running. The server that so basically I pass it the name, or in this case I'm passing in the domain name, which is localhost. You could pass in the IP address as it is, 127.0.1, but then at the end of the day it's going to be converted to an IP address. So it doesn't matter in what order, however you structure it. So now I see that I'm going to be forced to have a port number also this side. So I'm going to have private int port, and then it takes in a port number, and then this dot port is equals to port, because I don't know the port number yet. I only know it when I'm inside main. So yeah, so this will throw exception. So surround the try catch, because I know it's gonna throw an exception, right? So we have the socket, right? So this is us trying to connect. So this is the client trying to connect to that server. So client is trying to connect to the server, and the server is called localhost. So what happens if you put in localhost? So what happens is that when you put localhost, right, there's this thing called DNS, which is a domain name system, or domain name, what is it called? Server. Is it domain name server? I'm not sure what other name. Domain name server. That's another name for it. So what does it do? It basically converts. So if you pass in a domain name, right, what it does, it converts the domain name to an IP address. So that's why I said this constructor, you can use it in two ways. You can pass in the domain name as it is. What do I mean? For example, domain name is basically this, because it's, remember, if it was the case whereby we only crammed IP addresses. Remember, human beings are bad with numbers, as you've seen so far, that I kept forgetting numbers here. So let's say this was the number to connect to UJ's website. How will you remember this number? It's hard to remember. So that's why UJ would be named like this, www.uj.ac.za. So this would be the domain name, and the system that's involved, that converts that domain name to its actual IP address, is called DNS, or domain name system, or domain name server. So it converts, basically converting, that means it will convert from www.uj.ac.za .ac.za to this to its IP address. So it does end up at the end of the day, you're gonna pass in an IP address at the end of the day. This will be translated to an IP address. Because remember, IP addresses like ID numbers, they uniquely identify computers on the internet so that it knows who's who when you're on the internet, whose device this is. So we have that. Now I'm going to go to, okay, so there we go. So we create, right? So this is us trying to connect to the server. And then on the server side, let me go to okay, here it's gonna need me to put in a port number. So I'll just put in that number for now. I would have to test first which ports are available, because remember, port numbers are usually occupied. There could be some system or something running on that port. And then here I need to create a while loop because I need to be able to accept multiple clients. So while true, I'm gonna need the loop for that. Just repeat this as long as so basically keep connecting to that user. So while true, and then connect to the user. So on the server side, we create a server socket, right? So server is equals to new server socket, and then you put in the port number which this server socket would be running on or at. It runs at that port number so that when the user tries to connect, they can connect to that port, to that server running at that port number. And then this, no, I think I'm putting it in the wrong place. Oh yeah, it is fine. Well, the while loop will be there to basically, this is to handle multiple incoming users. So I don't want to repeat that code once. I want to repeat multiple times for every single user who connects to my server so that they can be multi-threading. If I didn't forget, yeah, I made it runnable, right? Remember? So when you create a thread and then you run this task, it's going to call the run method. So basically it's going to execute everything in the run method. That's why I'm putting the code in the run method. So we have this. And then okay, we have this. So now we're trying to connect to the server at line 89. If this goes well, if it managed to connect, if that goes well, then this line of code we can set up we can connect to our input stream on the socket, our input stream and output stream. Why? Because those are the streams that are used to receive data and output and send data. So I need to connect them on my socket. Remember, they're on the socket. So on both sides, the client and the server. So that means I can initialize here. Let's start with the buffered input stream, buffered read, and print write. So buffered read, I've called it input. So input is equals to new buffered reader. Remember, buffered readers for buffering, right? But then the actual class that we need is the input stream reader. So new input stream reader, which will help us convert, or this class basically helps us to, which term should I use? Decode, yeah. So to decode the zeros and ones into text. But then we also buffer it so that we just make the application fast. And then here it's going to take in the input stream, which is from my socket. Remember what I said, each socket has an input stream and an output stream. So here it accepts as the socket, so socket.get input stream to get the input stream on my socket. And then after this, I could, is it after this, the input stream or the, okay, no, it's fine. And then my print writer needs to be instantiated. Output is equals to new print writer. which also takes in a stream from my socket, but then I'm writing, so I need the output stream for that. So I look at my socket, I get its output stream. By default, it already points me to here. You could also set the auto flash to true if you wanted to do that. So auto flash just means flash, just like when you go to the toilet, you flush, right? It means that you are releasing that thing going down the drain, right? So it's the same thing here. It's data. That data is being flushed out. It makes flashing just makes sure that the data is sent out immediately, and there's no like clustering in the buffer. Everything it gets released in the buffer, and the data gets so the data goes to the other side. You could set it to auto flash, so to have to flash automatically, you could do that. Or you could call the flash method every time you use this output, this print writer, every time you need to flash. If you don't flash, your program is going to crash. So flashing, which makes sense because when you leave the toilet, you obviously have to flash. If a person has a tendency of not flashing, this is going to expose you because you need to flash always here. So we have our stream set up. We also left with data. Is it data in, right? Data input stream, because the user is the one, the client is the one who's downloading, right, from the server. So they're gonna receive data input, right? Input stream. Those bytes, they're gonna receive those bytes from the image. Why do I keep saying bytes from the image? Because remember what talked about, image is full of bytes. I can say open this with that. Can't I open it with the text editor? Okay, so I can open it with the text editor. You see that these are bytes, right? Image is just full of bytes. So what we are going to do is we want to read these bytes, these zeros and ones, right? You see that is not necessarily zeros and ones. So these bytes, we need to read them one by one and then send it to the client. We're gonna read them from our server because the image, remember, the images are stored on the server folder. We're going to read each byte, or all of those bytes, right? These zeros and ones, send them, create a new file on our client folder, input these bytes into the folder, basically copy and paste these bytes into the folder. That's pretty much how you're doing it. You're just sending data. That's it. When you're downloading, you're just sending those bytes, receiving, and the other one receives. The client in this case is the one who's going to receive those bytes. So I need a data input stream to receive them. So new data input stream, which links to my socket, and then I get the input stream. So it's going to link to my socket and then the input stream on my socket so that I can read those bytes that will be sent out by the data output stream by the server. So once this is set up, right, we've logged in, right, done. Not logged in, we've written the code so far to set up our streams and our buffered reader and our buffered our print writer. We've set up everything. We are good to go. So after this, now I can remember, and I shouldn't close the print writer because I'm going to use them in other buttons. I'm not going to close them. I'm going to leave them because I've established that link to my streams on the socket, right? Remember, the buffered reader is for us to read text, and then print writer is for us to write text to the server. The data input stream is to read input in terms of primitive types, but then we are, okay, let me put it this way. We are receiving bytes of data and we're going to interpret them in terms of primitive types. That's data input stream. That's what it's for. And then here now I can send a request to my server. So I can send a request to my server. How do I send it? Remember, we use print writer, and why are we using print writer? Because if you check the document, it's text. You need to send to the server greetings followed by the username and followed by the password. That's how it works. So before we can do that, something interesting comes into play here. Remember, our file, the users.txt is there. We still need to read from it. That's where the login details are stored. Okay, why is it doing this now? Let me refresh. Oh yeah, I forgot to refresh. So remember we have these different folders now. So Baggy 456, right? So it's just one line, right? That's all I have to read. If there's multiple lines, right, then you have to do a while loop scanner. So remember we talked about scanner, so I need a scanner for that. So I'm going to create a scanner that you don't need to create it there at the top. You can just declare it to wherever you're using it. I'm just declaring it here just in case I have to use it somewhere. So scanner, there's my scanner. And then I need to instantiate the scanner now. Since I'm trying to log in, I'm going to say scan is equals to new scanner, right? And then it takes in the file that I'm trying to scan. So this file is inside the data folder. Awesome. I think it can pick it up. Okay, it might not pick it up. So let me do this. I need to create a file class, file instance, right? Why am I doing that? Because different operating systems have different ways of naming folders and file extensions. What is directories? The path is different on different platforms. So I need a file class to take care of those issues, right? Those small issues of, because what are the small issues? I'm going to demonstrate now. So here is, I need to put Java doc port number where the server is running. So that's where the server is running. So there's that file. So why do I need the file? So let me open text notepad plus plus. I need the file because different operating systems have different philosophies. So Windows, it uses its root directory where all the folders inherit from, like um, the grandparent of all of everyone, basically the parent of all the descendants within that bloodline. That's what we call the root directory. So in this case, in Windows, it's the C drive, and Windows uses backslashes to go into the folder. So let's say it's backslash users backslash your name here. I don't know what your name is, and then go to downloads, something like that. Maybe that's why you've saved the practical. And then it downloads. Remember, I've called it computer science, blah, blah, blah. That's the folder. Within that, I have the data folder. Within the data folder, I have the client folder and so forth, right? So you see, that's how it approaches. Well, with Unix systems, right? This is your MacBook or Linux. The root directory is home. And you see already things are different. This is backslashes, now we're using forward slashes, and the root directory is home. It's no longer C drive. So now it has to be something like this. Your name, blah, blah, blah. But then now it's using forward slashes. That's why that terminal that I told you guys to install, it was mimicking a Unix. It sort of like gives you a Unix-like environment. That's why we had to change the backslashes to forward slashes and so forth. So this will be forward slash data, forward slash client, forward slash that file, right? Let's say it's you. No, it's inside the server. Where is it? It's a client, right? Yeah, it's inside client, and then it's called you. Did I save it inside client or I'm tweaking? No, this is okay. This is not the part that I'm trying to explain. Okay, I'm mixing up things. It's inside. It's inside the server folder, but then that's fine. But then I can still explain it. So as you can see, we have all of these things. So this this is what we would call the absolute path, because it starts by who was the first person within that bloodline, which is the root directory. So that we call that absolute. Relative is basically relative on whatever folder that is. So they say I say it's data, and then client, and then that file, the JPEG, whatever. So this will be a relative file. system, right? So you see that things are done differently on different operating systems. So that's why we need to use the file class, which handles that. It handles the absolute and relative paths, right? It handles all of that for you. So that's why I need to pass into that. I need to create a class. I need to instantiate it using the class file class, so that you can fix all those nuances, right? Those minute details. So new file, and then it takes in the name of the file. So the name of the file is the file that you want to read. Okay, like I said, my bad. I'm mixing up things. It's not supposed to be here, because why? I'm just mixing up things. It's not supposed to be here because the file is on the server. The server is the one that handles. So even the scanner is not supposed to be here. So I'm mixing up things. We'll put the scanner, these two things in the server side, because that's where we read from, which is the evolve handler, the one that deals with that. So we're gonna put them here. That's where we handle. So here, it's actually pretty simple here, the side. We just send a request. So I'm going to say send a greetings followed by the name, and then followed by the password to the server, right? This is what we're going to send. So I'm going to send the text greetings and the name and the password. So remember, the name and the password, I get them from the text fields, right? Yeah, which becomes very problematic now. If I've declared it at the bottom, it's going to complain that it does not exist. But then let me just check. Okay, yeah. So I've declared them before this button, so it will say they exist. So I've called the txt name and txt password. So there's the get text method that you can use for all text fields to get the text, basically to get what was typed within those text fields. So I'm gonna output send to my server, right? Because remember, if everything went well here, the rest of the lines will execute, meaning that I was able to establish a connection. So output.println, and then I'm going to send this request greetings followed by the name and the password. But then the name and the password I'm getting from the user. So I need to put that space there. After the space, I need to say plus to concatenate with the name. So it's stored under the text field txt name. But then I can't just type txt name. That's the name. That's an object. I want to get text on that object. So get text, which returns a string. And then remember the spaces. You see, there's a space after that name. So I need to say plus a space, and then plus the password, the txt password dot get text, and then that's pretty much it. But then remember, don't forget to flash. So output dot flash to make sure that you flash out or send out this thing, right? To flash it, send it. It's going to flash the text to the server. So far this is what we've done, right? Which is fine. So now we come here to the server. After this is done, right? After the server is running here. So here I can just output text and say sys out system out and say server is running um, at port, and then plus the port number, and then plus just 3 dots. So it's just going to output server is running at that port number. So I can test out which port numbers are available, right? I can test it out here. So here I can just create a simple socket. Remember, I'm just testing out which ports are available here. That's all I'm doing. So connecting to localhost. And then, okay, no, I shouldn't initialize it yet. I'm going to initialize it within the for loop. So remember, the range of ports is between 0 and 65,536. That's the range of ports that are available. But then ports between 0 and 1024 are reserved. So that's where you have your SMTP ports for sending emails, and they're reserved, those ones. Don't use them. But then sometimes they are available, so we can use them. So what I will do is I'll create a full of that goes from 0 up until I is less than or equals to 65,536 I plus plus, and then I create a new socket, right? I try to connect to that port number on running on localhost, basically running on on the same computer. So pass in I, and then surround the try catch. And then finally, I must not forget to close, because if I don't close, what's going to happen is these ports will still be, even though I managed to find come on, even though I managed to find a port that was available, it will say that the port does not exist, whatever, it's occupied, a bind exception. Or is it, no, it's a, yeah, so there's an exception that's gonna, okay, I forgot which one it is exactly. So this is the code. So I just need to jot down or write down what the port number is that's available. Okay, no, am I running the right one? Let me do this. Oh, okay, I forgot to output a message to say sys out, to say that it connected to port followed by the port number. So if this line went well, that means I was able to connect. That's why I output this line, output line, right, to output to the terminal, because I know if this ran well and it goes down here, that means I was able to connect. And then I'm going to right click my server and then say run as Java application. Why is it saying connection refused? Or cannot invoke on now? Hey, Java is really annoying. So the socket has been initialized to now, so you need to put a safety check there to say if socket is not equals to now, like this. That's why it was complaining. Okay, I don't want it to print. So this IO exception is thrown when you fail to connect to the port number, right? I don't want to print the stack trace. So I'm gonna comment that out and just leave it empty if it wasn't able to connect. And then there we go. These are the available port numbers, right? Or out of range so that means it's 535, 65,535. So I was wrong. Yeah. So let's use any port number. So I'll choose this one, right? I'll copy this port number. So now I know the available port numbers, right? And then I'm just going to delete this code. All of it. Because I was just testing which port numbers are available. Remember, even port 631 is available. So now when I run this client pane will connect to that port number. Because that's where the server will be running. So now I can just create a new server instance within my server main class. It goes to new, no, event handler. It's called event handler. Evol handler, not event handler. So this is my server. That's where it's going to be running. It's going to be run via this function, this class. Then I pass that port number. And then we need to do, remember, I need to do multi-threading. So wait, should it be? Yeah, we also need to put it in a while loop. So we'll do that later when we are done. When we're done with at least one command here. So while true, right? So as long as true, that means this code can be executed multiple times. So I need to instantiate all of these things, but then except file input stream, because we haven't got into files yet. Even the data output stream I was not supposed, it's fine. It's actually fine. I could initialize it there. It's also fine. And the scanner and the file class. There's a lot to initialize here. So here I'm going to accept the client connection, right? Accept the client connection. Remember what we talked about. In order for the connection to be established, the server needs to accept. So you see, it says, hey, I accept. So how does the server accept? And it returns a socket when you accept. So I'm going to also create a socket because, like I said, we communicate via sockets. So it's going to return a socket. So I know this will be the server socket. I can just call it socket to keep it simple. I know it's going to return a socket, the accept method. So when you accept, it returns a socket so that you can communicate via that socket. So socket that will be returned will be stored in that socket variable. And then my server, this server socket, it's going to accept a client connection. After this line, if this worked well, that means it was able to accept a client connection. So now we can instantiate, get the input streams and output streams and so forth. So input will be equals to new buffered reader, and then new input stream reader, because we want to interpret those bits into characters, right? So we need an input stream reader. Come on, there we go. And then that means I'm going to go to my socket and then get the input stream. So it's linked to, so basically the input stream gets passed, I think, what's that term? It gets passed, right? So it gets the bits, right, from the socket input stream, and then it transfers it into the input stream reader class to convert those bits into characters, right? And then they get buffered, those characters. This is just for speed, right? The buffered reader just for speed purposes. And then output is equals to new print writer, which takes in that socket's output stream. And you can set auto flash to true. That's up to you. But then I'll just flash after using it every time. So I've set this. Now I need to set my data output stream, then the scan, then the file, then the scanner. There's quite a lot. So data out, right? Oh yeah, it's data out because I need to send out those bytes from the image. So new data output stream, which is going to refer to my socket's output stream, socket.get output stream. Don't forget, every time you send out data must flash. So there's the data output stream. Everything is fine, right? So now we need to create that file. Remember what I talked about? The file class only helps us to avoid those issues between different operating systems, so that all those we just put in a relative path into the file, and then it's going to fill in the missing information. So I can just say client file.jpg or just file.jpg, just the file name. I can do that. Then it's going to append all of this, the full absolute path based on the operating system. It's going to do that for me. So that's the whole point of the file class. So I'm going to say new file. What's the name of that file? It's called users.txt, right? And then it's going to go locate that users.txt within my project. It has the intelligence to go look for that because I'm passing this file name to my file class. It knows how to handle that under the hood. Then I need to initialize my scanner. This goes to new scanner, and I want that scanner to be associated with that file, so that I can scan the information within the file. Then you don't have to do this, right? The while loop that I'm about to do right now. So read the user details from the file. You don't have to do what I'm about to do now. you don't have to do that. But then for safety reasons, just in case we have multiple details, right? Remember, this is our users.txt. Just imagine it's a file with multiple users. So therefore, I would have to read each line. So I have to say scan while scan dot has next line, has next line. So while there's a next line to read the line. And for that, I'm gonna need a string. So I'm gonna create a string called line, initialize it to an empty string because it's gonna read a line from the file. So I'm gonna read the line from the file, and I'm gonna need a string tokenizer, which is there's quite a lot involved here. So I'm gonna need a string tokenizer because after reading, I need to split that string, right? I need to divide it so that I can extract the user, the name, and the password. And it's split up, the separator is a space. So they are both separated by a space. So I'm gonna need the string tokenizer for that. So inside of my evol handler, I'm gonna create a string tokenizer, and I'm gonna call it tokens because it's gonna store my tokens, right? And then read that now I'm gonna read the line, right? So scan from my scanner dot next line to read that whole line. After I've read the line, then now I split it up into tokens. So after splitting it up into tokens, then we can get that means and there's only 2 tokens. Why? Because each line is going to have two sets of details, the name and the password. So I'm going to split this up into, that's why we tend to create methods for this to divide and conquer, right? So what I can do is I can create a helper method here and then call it, because you see now this one function is going to have multiple things or multiple code, right? Which tends to get a bit confusing. So I can do this, right? Okay, it's fine. It's fine. I feel like students get confused when there's multiple functions. They just don't see how everything links. It's fine. I'll just write it in that one order. So now we've read the string. Now I need to initialize my string tokenizer. So tokens is equals to new string tokenizer, which takes in the line or the string that you want to tokenize. Tokenize means turn it into tokens, and then followed by the delimiter. What are you going to use to split it up? You should split it up the moment you see a space like this. The moment it sees a space, split it up. So we're only going to have 2 tokens in my case, right? Which are the name and the password. So I'm gonna remember, even in C++, to declare multiple things of the same type, you use the data type, then you put a comma followed by the different variables. So here will be name, which will just be empty string, and then password, which will just be an empty string. So that I can store it into actual variables. So the name will be the first token. So tokens dot next token, and then the password will be the second token, right? So next token. But then it might happen that the file has extra spaces like this space on both sides, and that's gonna cause a problem, right? All those spaces. So I can use the trim function after reading the line. I can say dot trim to trim the ends, right? Or sort of like the edges, to trim your edges, right? So it's gonna go into the file. If there's any space this side, like this space, let's say this is the space that's there, it's going to trim it, basically delete it. And then if there's space also on this side like this, it's going to trim it or delete it. So that's why I need to use that trim method there. It's very important. So we've gotten the details. They are password and name. But then we need to compare these details to the details that we're going to receive from the user. So remember, they're going to send the details via the print writer, which is via the output stream. So that means we need to receive them via the input stream on the server side. So on the server side, I can also create an extra string here and call it response, which represents the response that I get, or request. Yeah, request is the right term, which represents the request that I get from the client. And then before I read, because why am I doing this before I read from the file? Because I need to get the actual name. I need to get the request here. I need to get this request. So since it's going to be a bit tricky, right? I'm gonna use an if statement or a switch statement. Yeah. So I'm gonna use a switch statement because there's gonna be multiple requests, right? There's going to be multiple requests. So I'm going to have a switch, but then like, yeah, so since this will be a problem, let me see. But then it's fine. Let's try what I'm about to do. Remember, switch statement also in Java, you can also pass in strings. So here I'm gonna pass in the request. And just in case, so that the request is in right order. So before I create the switch statement, right? I get the request from the user, get the request from the user. Yeah, you see, it becomes a problem now. You see the problem. You see, every time the user sends a request, I need to check what type of request it is. For example, does the request starts with greetings? Does the request start with evolve list? Does this request start with evolve get? Does the request start with evolve by? So since that's the case, I need to create a function. Yeah, I have no choice. I only say I have no choice now because I need to, that means I'm going to repeat the switch statements multiple times. So I don't want to do that. I just want to call a method. So I'm going to create a helper method here. So private void handle commands. I'm going to call it handle command or handle request. Handle request, which takes in a string, which is the request, right? I'm going to call it rec since I've already declared it here. Oh, okay, this is a local variable here, so it's fine. I can name it request again here. And then I'm going to do a switch statement. Switch request, right? And then before I do that, I need to make sure request is in a form that I would, okay, no, I shouldn't do that yet. Yeah, there's a lot involved here. So we need to also use the string tokenizer again. Why? Because look at the request. It's going to be greetings followed by name followed by password. So we need to split it up when you see a space again. So we're going to have 3 tokens, the request followed by the parameters. So that's what I'm going to do. So in my case, there's many ways I can do it. I can split it up or divide it into tokens within the function, or just before calling the function, I do that. So that's what I'm going to do. Let me choose. Let me do it this way. Let me split it up inside the function. So inside the function, I'm gonna create a new tokenizer, string tokenizer, right? So tokens is equals to new string tokenizer, which takes in that request. The request will just be the whole line. That's pretty much it. And then it's good. The delimiter, or the thing where to stop, is when you see a space. That's when you should split it up, the strings. And then we're gonna have, I need to create 3 strings here, which is the first one, I'll just call it first, and then remember the first is always the request. Let me just do it this way. Let me phrase the parameters line, the line that we get from the user, and then the first parameter will actually be the request. So what do I mean by request? Do you want to greet greetings, or evolve list to get a list, or evolve get to get the actual image? Which one is which, right? So string request Let me drink some water. Okay. So string request is equals to tokens dot next token, because that'll be the first token, right? And there's going, it depends. Okay, I only need the first token, right? I only need the first token. Why? Because some requests from the user, let me show you. Some requests from the user, they only have one parameter. Some they have two, some they have three. I should get the extra ones once I'm sure which request it was. So if the request is greetings, then I know that I should get two extra tokens. If the request is a vol list, then I shouldn't get any extra token because it's one, so that I avoid crashing my program. If the request is evolve get, then I should need to get an extra token which represents the ID. So let's do that. So request, and then the first case that I'm going to have is case. So the first case that I'm going to have is going to be the case when the user sends the request is greetings, right? That's the first case. And then break. And then the other case would be evol list, right? And then I need to break after this. And then the other one would be case, what's the other one? Evol get, and then evol by. Evol get, right? And then evol by. Evol by, if I'm not mistaken. I'll just double check on the PDF. And then break. And then I'm just gonna put tabs here to make it a bit beautiful. Put tabs, and then tabs. So evolve greetings, right? Evolve by, not evolve greetings, evolve by, yeah, it's evolve by. And then this is what should happen when something was successful. You should append it with sharp followed by the message. When something was, if it was unsuccessful, it's nope. It's nope followed by message. For provide a reason for why it did not work, right? So so we can't assume that the user always follow the rules. So we can't assume that they're gonna type in the first command greetings and evolve list or evolve get or evolve by. They might breach the they might breach the agreement, right? Breach the contract that we have. So I can put a default case in the switch statement. I could do that. We'll do that a bit later. Let me focus on greetings and seeing if the things are working so far. So greetings, when we greet, right? Yeah, so remember after greeting, that means we have extra two tokens from the user, extra two sets of information from the user, which will be the name and the password. So now I can go copy that code that I was typing there. I can actually just copy this, cut this, and then name and password. I'll now put them here, and then okay, and then I need to put it user tab, and then I need to declare the strings, right? So string name, and then password is equals to empty strings, right? And then we get the two extra tokens because we know under the greetings request you'll get two extra sets of inputs. So yeah, we've read the file, right? There's the file. Okay. No, what am I doing? Okay, this is before we do that, let me see. Before we do that, because we have two types of now there's a lot going on here. Let me do this. Let me delete here. So after this split, remember we've created a string tokenizer for this line, which is a request from the user. So that request from the user will have the command. I think it's fine. Let me put it back to request. And then the first input will be the command. What is the user commanding us to do? And then the other parameters depends on the command. The command here is greetings, right? It means that they want to log in. So the next that means this command would come with two extra inputs, right? Which is, if you remember here, the client also passed in the name and the password. So those name and password, you need to come this side and extract them. So I need to say name is equals to tokens dot next token to get the name, and then password is equals to tokens dot next token. So now we have the two extra inputs, right? The name and the password from the user. After reading here, we'll be getting information from the file. So we need to confirm this from the user and from the file. So I can call this my username, then call this user password to avoid confusion, right? By user, all I'm just saying is that all I mean is that this is from the user or from the client. And then I'm going to have two other strings or three, because I also need a variable to store the line that I'm going to read from the file. So I need to create a line string, and then this one I'll call it file user, file name. I can't say file username, that's going to be long. File name is also, yeah, I'll just say file username, basically the name in the file that we've read, and then file password or file user password, because file password is like what's the it seems like it's the password for the file. So file username and then file user password. This is information that we're getting from the file. Don't mistake in it. Don't make that mistake. So now I instantiate I create a new string. What am I saying? I say new and then I scan. I didn't instantiate the scanner here. Yeah, I must not make that mistake. So these two things, they actually need to come here. So take this, they need to be implemented within the file. So within the function, I mean, take this, put it here, right here, so that the scanner is instantiated. If I don't instantiate it here, that means I would have to pass it as a parameter here, which is unnecessary. So I'll just instantiate it within that function. So scan dot next line to scan the whole line, right? Okay, this will throw an exception. Yeah, that will throw an exception. So it means that everything should be in a try catch, since it will throw an exception. Or I can just leave it as it is. As long as there's no finally block, I don't close the scanner. I shouldn't close the scanner yet. That's why I didn't put a finally block. And that's why I also didn't use ARM, so that it continues downward and the scanner is still available for use. So we have that. Then after reading this line from the file, right? So here I read a line from the file. And remember, it's within a while loop because there might be multiple lines. So as long as this has next line, it means that there's a next line available. Keep reading that line until we find the user that I'm currently looking for. That's why I'm going to do if statements to check if the passwords match. So I'm going to do if statements to say, which is basically before I do password if statements, I need to get the token, split it up into tokens, right? The line I need to split it up into tokens. So tokens is equals to new. I just reuse that one that I already have there. So new string tokenizer. You pass in the line that you've read from the file, and then the delimiter. When should it stop splitting? When it sees a space, that's when it should stop. It should stop extracting. And then now I need to save the file username, which is the name in the file, which should be the first first token, and then file user password will be the next token, which is the second string. So now I have the names from the user and the names from the file. Then now I can compare, because what this while loop will keep reading all the users within the text file. I don't want all of them. So when it found the right one that matches, it should exit this loop. So I should put a break. How do I find how do I know if I found the right one? I compare the login details that the user sent to me with the details inside of my file. So I do an if statement. So if the file username, the name inside the file dot equals, I can use ignore ignore case. I can use that, but I want to be strict. They need to match exactly, right? It's fine. It's fine. The username is still the same, but then we need to be strict. So I'm gonna leave it as equals to. Then this will be equals to user name, and if file user password right, dot equals to the user password. So if the name and password that the user has provided me, they match with the password, name and password inside of my file, then I can exit this loop. It means that I've found the user that I'm looking for, right? And if I found the user that I'm looking for, then I know that the user does exist. So I can send back a response to the user. So I'm just gonna keep it simple. I'll make a Boolean here and say does user exist? Okay, or just call it user exists. By default, to set it to false, just assume that at this point in time, the user does not exist. And then within my if statement, right? So I'm just gonna come here and put it here. So within the if statement, that means I found the user right here. Yeah? So if I found it, then I update my user exist to be equal to true, because it means that I found the user. And then break the loop, stop reading from the file, because I found the user that I'm looking for. If I haven't found, I must keep searching and then eventually just exit on its own. If we have 6 million users, that's going to be a very long time, but then that's fine. So if this is false, right, that means user exist will remain as false. That means the user was never found, which is fine. And then now here I need to send a response to the user or to the client. And remember, how do you send when something went well? Remember what are the requirements? It should say sharp successful command with the message, right? So sharp means that sharp everything went well. And then nope means that something didn't go right. So how do we check if everything went well? I use that Boolean if user exists, right? Exists. So I can say if user exists is equals to true, or I can just leave it as user exists. It will check if it's true. If it's true, it will execute. Then I have the else part to say if this variable has a value of false. Then we send back we send a response to the user. So remember, to send a response, we need to use the output stream data, the output stream to send out data or information. So output dot print line, and then this will be sharp followed by whether the user successfully logged in or not. Successfully logged in, right? And then don't forget to flash. So output dot flash, and then afterwards if it's an else, that means the user does not exist. That means the variable user exists was false. So we output nope, account does not exist, or user does not exist. It's up to you how you phrase the errors. As long as you've used sharp and nope, you get marks for that. So output dot flash, and then that's the first command that we've handled, right? So that'll be greetings. So that will be greetings. So I need to call the handle request function. So I need to keep calling this method every time I send out data, right? So remember the user so far, we haven't extracted from our input stream as the server the output that was sent via the output stream by the client. Remember, the client is sent out via the output stream. They sent out greetings followed by this, right? So let's get that request or that line. So let me just call it line from the user, right? And it's simple. We call the read line function. So this is input now. So I'm going to use my buffered reader because I'm getting input from the client. So dot read line, which reads that line that the request is the user sent. And then I can trim that line to make sure that it's fine. So I can just trim it immediately after getting it. So read line dot trim to make sure there's no extra spaces there. And then after doing that, I handle that request by taking in that whole line. I call this method. And then I get the line again, and then I call the handle request again. So you keep doing that. That's why because if you didn't create a function, you'd have to keep rewriting this every time. That's why the function is a bit better. So far, the only request we've handled is greetings. So remember, when we handle greetings, we send back a response to the user via our output stream as the server. So the client needs to also receive a response now. So receive or get back a response, receive a response from server. And we need to append that response to our txt file, the text area, I mean. So before we do that, let's just get the response first. So string line is equals to input my buffered read line. And then after reading from the response from the server, then now I can display the response on my text file. So txt on my what is this text area? It's called txt server response dot append text. So it's going to append text. Before I append, I'm going to put a tab just to make sure it's readable, right? Just put a space, just that tab. It's not necessary to put it, but then I just like to put it. So line plus the line, which is the response from the server, plus an end of line character to move on to the next line. So this is pretty much it for the first response, for the first request. So let me see how long the video is. It's an hour already. So let me charge my laptop. So charge my laptop. Okay, we are safe. So as I was saying, we need to test it out. So remember, we need to run the server first. So before we do that, right, inside of my server class, we need to handle multiple users, right? So multi-threading. Remember, this is a runnable. This is a runnable task. So I can pass it into a thread. So in order for me to pass it into a thread, it's simple. I'll need a while loop first, right? So while true, because there's going to be multiple users. And then I can create a thread and say new thread, blah, blah, blah. But then if you read the textbook, right, the textbook advises that you use a thread pool. because that means you have to allocate a thread every time there's a new user, and you are the one allocating the thread. So if there's 16,000 users, you have to write 16,000 threads, which makes no sense. So what you can do is you can call the executor. It's going to return an executor service, right? So there's you can create a thread pool. Basically, think of a thread pool as like a pool. You see, like pool of water. A pool of water, let's view it as like an array of drops of water, right? It's like a collection of waters, if it's, such a thing existed. So the thread pool, a pool of threads. So it creates the threads for you. And if the threads are if that thread is no longer in use, it can reuse that same thread. So it makes the application fast. So I'm gonna use that. So this is how you can create it. It's gonna return, if I'm not mistaken, an executor service, right? Executor. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's gonna return an executor service. Yeah, yeah, it returns an executor service, and then you call in a static method from executors class. So you say executors dot. You can create a cached thread pool, right? So the cached thread pool, it means that, as you can see, it's written there. That's why I don't understand why sometimes you get confused, because Java comes with documentation. You see, it creates a thread pool that creates new threads as needed, but will reuse previously constructed threads when they are available. So it creates the threads for you. And then you can also say new fixed thread pool, which means that it's fixed. It takes in a fixed number of threads. You have to use a fixed number of threads. Maybe you want to use a fixed number of 10 threads. Even if you have 16 million users, you want to use 10 threads maximum. You can use the fixed thread pool. I'm going to use the new cached thread pool one. And then you call the execute method to execute that task, right? That task that you want to execute. So I'm going to say executor dot execute. It creates it. You need to pass in a runnable task. So here it's going to execute the task. And it depends on, here you don't have to worry about how many threads will be created. It manages everything. And the strict rule in the textbook, it says that if you have one task, you use threads. If you have more than one task or one client, right? Or more than one task, right? Because you're gonna have multiple users. So if you have more than one, then you have to use a thread pool, whether that's a fixed thread pool or a cached thread pool. That's up to you. So I'm gonna start by running my service, my server. I'm thinking about informatics 2B. So server, let's see if it runs. Okay, or maybe I shouldn't put it in a while loop. Did I do something wrong? Or maybe I put the while loop in the wrong place. Yeah, let me check something here. Yeah, I think the problem is here. Yeah, so I don't think I need the while loop here. Let me just double check. It's either I don't need it here, or I don't need it in my main. One of those. So let me test out. Let me remove it there and test out and see. Okay, seems like that's not the problem. Wait, what is the actual error here? Already in use. Okay, why is it complaining that it's already in use? Or is it because it's choosing threads and things like that? Okay, it makes sense. But then this thing sucks sometimes. Let me do this. Let me remove it here. I think the issue should be here. I think I need to remove and then put the while loop needs to be there. Yeah, I think I put the while loop in the wrong place. So here it's fine. You can just leave it without the while loop here. It's going to keep executing, creating more threads as needed. So there's the server, it's running at port, blah, 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 right? And then in my client main, I need to pass that exact same port number, or else I'm going to connect to the wrong server. Then I run my client main, run as Java application. Okay, so far it didn't crash, right? No crashes. So I need to get a response from my server. So let me just say test 1, 2, 3. Okay, I need to actually, this is a wrong field here. I need to create a password field. I forgot what it's called. I think it's, yeah, it is password. It shouldn't be visible what I'm typing. So let me click login. Okay, something didn't go right. Let me do, let me, oh, I think I forgot something very important, but then we'll do that now. So let me pause this. What's the issue? Oh, file not found. Okay, so it couldn't find the file. So sometimes that it happens, right? It says doesn't find the file. What you can do is, oh, I can do this. Let me fix that. Let me try to specify the folder. So there's my, okay, evolve handler is the one that handles the reading from the file. So within the function, so it's within the data folder, within server folder, you should find it. So we'll see if it's still complaining. And then run again. Test, that's my name. Yeah, we need to fix this text field. Yeah, perfect. You see, nope. Use account does not exist because the details did not match. So, which is, we're on the right track. This is good. Just that there's quite a lot involved. So what I need to fix now is, what is this? The password field, right? Let's check what is called the inside the scene builder. So let me say field. Yeah, password field. Like I said, it's called password field. So I'm gonna go back here. It's exactly the same as text field. The only difference is that it's for passwords. That's the only difference. So I need to go back here, and then where I created password here, I need to change it to a password field. So password field, copy, paste, and then import from JavaFX. And then by default, it's going to have the password field features, right? So there's something that I'm missing. What did I forget? There's something that I was forgetting here. I'm not sure what it is. So password field, right? That's fine. So let me run my server. Remember, every time you have to run your app, you must run the server first and then run the client first. Okay, it's still running. That's why it's doing this. So I need to stop it from running. Or I could have just left it. That's fine. And then run again. And then run my client, my client's main. And then they just type and see. Yeah, you see password field now. Now it hides the details, so that when the person is typing, the next person, this person sitting next to you can't see. So that's fine. What are the details again? Buggy 456. So let's type the right details. Buggy, and then enter 456. We should get sharp successfully logged in, right? Perfect. Sharp successfully logged in. That's the server. It sent us the response that sharp. We're able to log in. So we are logged in. Now we can get the details. So what I would do, and right, this is quite interesting. So what I would do, right, is you see this boolean over here. I'm gonna declare it at the top. I'm gonna use it everywhere to check if the user is logged in. You can't get the file, the image files, if you're not logged in. All of those things you cannot do if you're not logged in. So it's strict. You have to be logged in. So now I'll make it be accessible within my class. So everything worked perfectly as we expected. Everything is fine. There's the response that we send to the user when they send the greetings request. And then there's another request that the client can send now based on the button, right? Remember, this was the button for login. We are done with logging in. I'm going to leave login now. Remember, we've set up our streams. Everything is set up. We need to go to btn get list, right? So when this button is clicked, it sends a request to our server to get the list. So btn get list dot set on action event, and then I'm going to use a lambda here, and then now we can send a request to the user, to the server. I mean, send evol list request to server. And remember, I didn't put a finally block to close my streams. If you put a finally block, it's going to crash when you click the next button. Don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. And then I'm going to, there we go. So let's send the evol list request to the server, which is simple. I'm just going to say output.println evol, come on, evol list. And then remember, you always need to flash to send out the data. You must flash it out, take it out, release. You must release, which is a weird, I don't know why programmers called it flash. They're relating this thing to feces. That's weird. Someone is a weird fetish. So it's a vol list, which returns a list of available image files. So the server retrieves the available image files from the image list text and returns it to the client. So image list is actually in the server. So everything is in the server. Now when I think about it, everything is actually in the server. This image list is actually in the server. So it says complaints that I can't directly copy and paste here. So I need to go to the project and then data client. So nothing is in the client. The client is just communicating with the server. Everything is in the server, even the image list, which is fine, which is perfect. That's a perfect understanding of the problem. So client is empty. Client just all it does is communicate to the server. So server is like Google Drive. Everything that you've uploaded there, you want to download it, save it locally to your computer. It's something like that. So send this command evol list, and then I go to my evol handler. So this was the first request, right, from the user, which is the greetings request. Now I'm going to get the next request. So get the evol list request, and then same thing, line, I read it via my input stream. Remember, we talked about these things, right? Input stream and output stream. When one uses the output stream, the other uses the input stream to receive data. So I receive the data here. Then I handle that request. I handle the request. Bless me. So after getting that request, it seems like someone's talking about me out there. They say if you sneeze, someone's talking about you. So I'm going to handle evol list request, right? But then remember, if only user exists, that's the only time it should be executed. If the user does not exist, then we cannot execute. That means before I do anything, I must do an if statement and say if user exists, right? If user exists, then I must return the list. So returning the list is the same thing, scanner again, file again. So pretty much the same thing. So I need to say file, create a new file, right? And then specify where is it stored. Remember, this is just to, this file class is so that it appends the full path depending on the operating system. So I'm going to say within the data folder, within the server folder, you should find an image lists list.txt, right? Image list.txt, image list.txt. And then I want to create a new scanner to read that file. So scanner file. Scanner is for reading it in terms of text, right? That's the scanner. If you wanted to do things like reading it in terms of bytes, something like that, then you could you would use a file input stream for that if you want to read it in terms of bytes. But then this was stored in text form, so I'm going to use a scanner to scan the text. And then after this, if this executes, everything should be fine. Then we can continue at the bottom here. Now we can read from the file. So let's read from the file, right? Scanner, reading every single line. So what I can do, right, is since I'm going to be reading multiple lines, I can use what we call an array list. If you remember an array list, I can use what we call an array list, and then that array list, or just a string, not even an array list. Let me not complicate it. Let me just use a string, and then append every line that I get to some string, right? So I'm just gonna call some string str files, right? Because I need to send it as one string. Remember, when you're using buffer reader and print writer, yes, it views it in terms of one string. So keep that in mind. Or if you wanted to, you can use a string builder. That's totally up to you. Or a string buffer. It's totally up to you. I'm just going to use a normal string and then append strings by just saying plus or equals to. That's the approach I'm going to use. So my image list, right? So let me just double click to open it. So there's the image list. I'm just going to read every line. That's pretty much it. Nothing fancy. So I'm going to check if there's a next line to read. So while dot has next line, and then after that I read the line. Don't I have the string called line here? Oh, I declared it in there, which is fine. I can also redeclare it here. Just normalize not redeclaring. It's advisable to redeclare it at the top, to declare it once at the top, and then scan the line and then read the next line. After reading it, don't forget to trim on both sides to remove those spaces. So I need to send this list of files in one line, right? So what I can do is I can send it in this way. I can say one, let's say elon.jpg, and then concatenate it with two tesla.jpg, like this. So I can append a dash here. Why am I appending a dash? So that I can split, use the string tokenizer that side to split and get all the single file names. So that's why I needed to create the string, because remember, I'm forced to send it as one string. Or I could just put in a space. The problem is if you put in a space, you see there's space, there's also space there, also a space there, also a space there. So now it's going to split up into like this. One will be on its own. Elon.jpg will be on its own. The integer number 2 will be on its own, which is a problem. So that's why I need to put a hyphen there to make sure that it splits when it sees the hyphen. So when it sees the hyphen, it's going to split it up into multiple strings, right? So it's going to say this. So you see, I get the index number in the file and the file name, which is perfect. So now I can say str files my string plus or equals to append that line to this string. So I am reading all the strings and I'm appending them to this line, to this string, I mean, to form one string, right? Or you can use a string buffer, string builder. That's totally up to you. Oh, okay. I'm not done yet. This something's missing. Remember, we need to put the hyphen at the end of the file. So after reading that file, at the end of that line, I need to put a hyphen. this hyphen will be used to split up the string so that I get this string on its own and also get that string on its own. Remember, there's three files. There's the other one, inico.jpg. So it's going to split it up. When it sees that hyphen, it's going to split them up. So it's going to be sent in one string like this, which is perfect. That's a very ingenious way of approaching it. So now let's send a response, because remember this is us handling that request from the user. So let's send back a response to the user. Send a response to the user, which is the client. Let's send the response. So output dot print line, print that string str line, not str files. I mean, it's called str files. Then output, don't forget to flash it out to send it. So flash the buffer to send it out. So now the response has been sent to the user. So now the user should get a response immediately after sending this. So immediately after sending this, I'm going to say receive response from the server. And then remember the response in our case, right? Okay, remember if everything went well, we need to send a response. If something didn't go well, we need to cancel, right? We need to send the sharp and no. Sharp means that it was able to get, and the nope means that it wasn't able to get. So how do I check that? It's kind of simple. I'm going to just check if str files is not empty. So if str files is empty, if it's not empty, I mean, so if it's not empty, then do this. Oh no, I don't have to necessarily do it here. Yeah, let me not do it here. Let me do it that side, because the client is the one with the GUI. I'll do it that side. I would receive the response and check if the response was not empty. So you see, this is the problem. Now I'm going to have to redeclare string line. I don't want to do that. So let me go up there and declare the string line there once. String line, so that I can use it in all the other buttons. So now I'm going to use that string line to get a response from the user, which is line is equals to input, because if the server sent out text via the output stream, the client will receive it via the input stream, because it acts as input for the client. It's incoming data. So input dot read line, and then it's gonna throw an exception, right? So surround with try catch. Yeah, so try catch, right? It means that we did get a response from the user. That's fine. So if we didn't get a response from the user, right, when it throws an exception, if it throws an exception, we need to say that we need to output in the txt server response text area. Remember, dot append. I must append a tab always so that I have that space. And then the response here, I'll just say it's okay. Let me see. How did I do the first one? Or the first one, I ended up sending a response like this. This one, okay, this one is different. I need to send the user needs to receive the file list. So I have to actually handle it this side, that the nope response and the sharp response. I have to handle it on my client side. So I don't have to expect the response from the server. So here I'll just say nope. What's the issue here? So nope, no response, no file list was returned, was received, I mean. And then end of line character when no file was received, right? When no file list was received, or the image list, when no image list was received. And then here, remember, if this line executes well, that means everything after that line will run, right? So that means after here, everything will run perfectly. So now I can send, I can do multiple things, right? Remember, I need to create a string tokenizer. So tokens, is it declared at the top? Okay, so now I'm forced to also have a string tokenizer this side. Yeah, there's quite a lot involved, DHM. You have to be very patient. String tokenizer, tokens, because remember, I'm gonna receive that file list in, and it's gonna have that hyphen that I want to split it up into tokens. Remember, there's many ways you can do it. You can use the split function in the string, which returns back an array of strings, which is also fine. But then I want to use a string tokenizer. So it's equals to new string tokenizer, which takes in that line, which is the response from the user, from the server. And we split it up when you see the delimiter hyphen, because remember how the data was sent. It's sent in this format. So it means that when I see this hyphen, I should split it up. So that's why I'm doing that way, doing it like that. And remember, we're going to have multiple tokens, right? So to handle all the tokens, I can't assume that the image list will always be three files, right? I'm just going, I don't want to assume that. There's a function called has next to has more tokens. So I'm going to do a while loop, sort of like has next line in the scanner class. There's a function called tokens, and you say dot has more tokens if there are more tokens available, right? If there are more tokens available, then continue reading. So while there's more tokens to read, then append that token into the txt response. Txt, not server response, txt list. I think I put it at the bottom here. Okay, it's not here. I think it's at the top. Txt list. Remember, there's that text area. No, is it txt list? What did I call it? Txt server response. Okay, txt password, btn get list, lbl list for the list of images, right? Oh, I've called it here. I called it txt images. Well, I need to now declare it before that button, or else the code is gonna crash. It will say txt images is not defined. That's the problem with this thing. So just right before I use I call the txt images, I need to declare the text area thing. So just right before text, so it's called txt images dot append text because it's a text area, remember? And then I'm gonna append a tab plus the tokens dot next token to get basically the tokens that I'm gonna read is from this response that I got from the server. I'm gonna read them one by one, those file names, append a new line character. So as long as there's more tokens to read, so it doesn't matter how many files there are in the list. So even if there's 6 million, it's gonna read all 6 million and display them within the txt images text area. So, okay, this will be wrong. This is wrong. I need to run the server first. Okay, lucky enough it is running. So just double check to make sure it's always, if it's running, then you can just, so I need to select this and then run as Java application. So you could also, before I do this, you could also do this, right? Remember, when you accept a client connection, that means a client is connected. So I'm going to go to my evolve handler and then go to that code where we connect to, where we accept the client. So after this line, when the client is connected, we can say that sys out and say that the client is connected. So client has connected successfully. So the client is connected successfully there. I could also display the client number, say client number 2 has or whatever. I could do that. You don't necessarily have to do that, but you can do that. So I'm just gonna leave it, since in my case I'll just be testing with one client. It's fine. I don't have to put that counter there. but we can test with multiple clients, so you'll see that it actually works. Yeah, I will add that counter. I have no choice because I need to also test to show you that it works with multiple clients. So Buggy, and then password is 456, and then log in, sharp successfully logged in. There's the, and then here it also told me that the client is successfully logged in because after clicking the button, we were able to log in, right? And then I need to click this button to get a list of the images. So bam, there's the list of images. There they are. Perfect. So there's the list of images from the server. Remember, this is my client. I'm getting all of this from the server. But then I forgot to output sharp here to say that the images were extracted successfully. So I need to fix that. So let me pause here. So let's go back to our client pane. So if everything went well here, that means there's no crash, there's nothing that crashed. Therefore, I can say txt server response.append, and then append a tab followed by, okay, I don't know why I was doing it this way. I can just say sharp followed by successfully retrieve successfully retrieved image lists, right? I could do that, or I could just, it's going to be annoying, but then I could do that, right? It's just that it's annoying. There's a lot of going back and forth, sending and receiving. So what I would do is, after handling that request, right, after sending the image list here, I will also send a response, right? Like sharp successfully sent, or no successfully couldn't send. So here will be when everything was sent, right? This will be successfully sent. That means when you get to this line, that means everything was successfully sent. So I'm going to say print line, and then I'm going to say sharp. That means everything went well. So here I'm going to say sharp successfully sent list of images. Or successfully sent, let me say this, successfully sent image list.txt. And then don't forget to flash. So output dot flash. And then something could also go wrong, right? So let's say the user is not logged in. So that's the else part. So I need to handle that and say else. That's the else part for this if statement. That's when the user is not logged in. So I need to send a response to the user and say, please logged in. Nope. I will just say nope. User is not logged in. Please log in. You can do that. It doesn't matter how you phrase it. So dot flash to flash out that data. So now I don't have to type it myself here. I get a response from the server. So I get a response again, right? Remember, this was me getting the list. So here I was getting the list, the getting the list of images. And then here, this is me getting a response on whether they were successfully sent or not. And then this here will be line is equals to input dot read line. And then don't forget to trim, just for safety purposes, just to trim your line, right? The response that you get. And then this will be that line, which is the response from my server. Start on a new line. And then evolve handler, every time you accept, you see every time this while loop is executed, right? We need to increment the number of clients. So I'm going to create an int variable at the top. So what I'll do, I'll just make it simple. I'll say number of clients. or client number. It's up to you. So when the run method starts, I would, okay, not when it starts. I'll do this when the server runs. I should set the number of clients to 0, and then I just increment it by 1. So every time, and it's only within the loop. After this accept line, that means we're able to accept a client. That means a client was logged in, or was connected, right? Has connected. So now I can say client followed by the client number. So client followed by the client number, and then I'll say that client number has successfully client what has successfully connected to server. So that client followed by their client number, they've successfully connected to the server. So that when we run multiple clients, you can see that, okay, this is a different client by seeing the client number than to just say client client is connected. We can't really tell if it's able to manage multiple clients. So 456 successfully logged in. And as you can see, client 1 is successfully connected. I could also do this. I'll show you just now that you can run multiple clients can run. Get a list of images, and then there's the response from the server. Sharp successfully sent the image list.txt. This is the server response. It was able to send us the list because we were logged in. They should also be log out, but then yeah, I totally made a mistake. They should be log out, but then it's too late now because that's going to affect a lot of changes in my code. But then it's fine. I can just extend the size of this thing and then add an extra button for logout. And then it's going, the server is going to send me a response. So there's the files. So now the user can type in ID1 for the first file, or ID2 for the second file. Then we get that file with using the ID name. So we have that. We have done everything, right? So now I'm going to pause this and stop it from running. So I think I should end the video here, and then we should continue in the next video. So see you in part 3.